One of the things that we find that many times people who first look into this come to it from a very sort of nuts and bolts, kick the tires on the UFO sort of perspective. And that's certainly understandable because people start from where they are. And however, we have to understand that if it's purely a kick the tires on the UFO type thing, you're probably talking about one of the anti-gravity vehicles made by Lockheed Martin at their Skunk Works, or by the Phantom Works at Boeing, which used to be the McDonnell Douglas. We'll get into this in a minute. And also maybe from Northrop's Grumman Secret Operations, or some of the other facilities that are up in the high desert of California near Palmdale and Lancaster, up near the Edwards facility, or the areas out in so-called Area 51, which is really Pahut Mesa, and some of the other classified areas in Utah. And that's more of the kick in the tires, because you're dealing with things that are man-made, anti-grav things that are manufactured according to conventional manufacturing, but also, while they are anti-gravity, they're not nearly as exotic as an extraterrestrial interstellar vehicle. And the distinctions are significant, because when you're dealing with faster than the speed of light, you're talking about technologies that literally phase shift from linear space-time transdimensionally into other dimensions, and back again. And so the kinds of experiences that people have when they're in close proximity to an actual ET spacecraft or an ET being are quite distinct from that of a man-made, so-called alien reproduction vehicle, or ARV as it's been termed. Or in the old days they were called flux liners, because they picked up the energy from the magnetic field flux of space-time and would be anti-gravity and weightless. And to anyone who look at them, they would look, oh my God, I just saw a UFO, which is sort of true. It was unidentified to them, but it certainly was an extraterrestrial. And so when you start talking about the actual ET stuff, you're talking about really, really interesting sciences and technologies, which is what CSETI, the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, deals with, and the Disclosure Project deals in disclosing. So you can go to cseti.org and disclosureproject.org and see more about this. And we put a lot of this out in various books and papers and videos that describe it. But I want to sort of summarize this. And I want to go back to one of our witnesses who had worked in the aerospace industry for many years, Dr. Robert Woods, who was a Cornell and scientist who became an aerospace engineer for McDonnell Douglas and worked closely with Mr. McDonnell himself. Now, a lot of people don't realize that McDonnell Douglas aircraft that got bought out some years ago by Boeing, had their Phantom Works, and also had Mr. McDonnell had a very high interest in so-called metaphysical issues, as well as UFOs and all the high strangeness attached to it. And I was fascinated. If you go to disclosureproject.org, you can see there's some books and videos that we have that have a number of these top secret military and aerospace engineer witnesses in them. And one of our interviews that I did was with Dr. Woods. And Dr. Woods told me a number of really interesting stories that illustrate what I want to talk about today. And one of them was having been asked by Mr. McDonnell of McDonnell Douglas to look into the UFO issue and to collect evidence and information on it, particularly on the propulsion and the anti-gravity part of it. And this was back in the 60s. And Mr. McDonnell had a long-term interest in this. And I also found out from Lawrence Rockefeller when I was out at Lawrence Rockefeller's ranch back out in the early 90s that Lawrence Rockefeller was friends with Mr. McDonnell, and that they both had a very high interest in the metaphysical aspects of the ET presence and the UFOs. So having sort of been involved with this now for 20 years, I want to sort of give people the benefit of the history of this that's often covered up, even within the UFO research community. And that is that all the way back to the 50s and 60s, it was known that there were people who were having contact experiences with ETs where the communication was through machinery, if you want to look at it that way, or electronics, but directly interfacing with thought. I'll never forget Dr. Woods telling me this story of having been sent to investigate a case. I'm pretty sure it was in the Baja California, where an ET craft landed and some people walked upon it, and there was an ET standing outside the craft that had a little sort of oblong or rectangular box sort of being held or attached to the midsection of the abdomen. And the people were communicating or had communications from the ET that were being directly transmitted from the ET through this communication system so that they heard it as clear as if you were speaking with your mouth in their heads, in their minds. And this has been called a neurophone, but a really advanced one that uses transdimensional electronics. And they began to investigate this. In fact, Dr. Woods and Mr. McDonald were very interested in these sort of cases. So we know that in the 50s and 60s, there were serious people in the air, the head of McDonnell Douglas Aerospace, for heaven's sakes, looking into this, what Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who ran Project Blue Book for the Air Force, called High-Strangeness. And it's because the secret and the real revelation, scientifically, if you will, about this whole subject has to do with the transdimensional and interdimensional nature of it, and the way that ET spacecraft move through space, but also how their occupants communicate with each other and with humans, which gets into this very, very out there sort of world to people who aren't accustomed to it.